Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Let's go ahead and bow our heads and pray. Yahuwah, thank you for allowing me to speak your truth and to sound this morning message to your remnant. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. Starting over. Yahuwah, thank you for allowing me to speak your truth, and thank you for gathering us here today. And thank you for allowing us to live in these times where mass information is coming to light. Guide this study in your Ruach today, Yahuwah. Send your discernment down to my viewers. Lift the Ruach of deep sleep from them and awaken their spirits. We praise your name, Yahuwah, and we praise the name of your Son, Yahushua HaMashiach, the one who redeems us from our iniquity, the deliverer of our Yeshua. We wait hopeful for that day, Abba. In Yahushua's name we pray. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to Torah Truth Fellowship of Yahushua. I am your host, Brianna, and this is the Torah portion. So we haven't had a Torah portion in quite a few weeks now. I've just been really busy, you guys. Life has just been super busy lately. And also, don't forget to go find my ministry on Facebook. You just type in the name and into the search bar, and you will find our group. Okay, so the last Torah portion, we covered Genesis chapters 36 through 38, which told of how Jacob loved Joseph more than all of his sons, and Joseph's brothers were really jealous of him because of that, and they had planned to kill him, but Reuben talked them out of it, and instead they just cast him into a pit, and then they sold him to some merchants from Midian for 20 pieces of silver. And then the men of Midian then again sold Joseph to some Yishmaelim for the same 20 pieces of silver. And then these men put Joseph up for auction, where he was bought by Potiphar, Pharaoh's chief officer. And then this week we will be covering chapters 39 through 41, which will go over Jacob's time spent in Egypt, and how at first he was glorified and then he was severely afflicted, to be glorified even more later on. So showing us that our afflictions bring us closer to glory. They humble us, and ultimately they test our obedience. So, all right, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. Beginning in chapter 39, if you have your Bible ready, go ahead and open it up to Genesis chapter 39, and let's go ahead and read. All right. And Joseph was brought down to Mitzrayim, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, a Mitzri, bought him of the hands of the Yishmaelim, which had brought him down thither. And Yahuwah was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his Adonai the Mitzri. And his Adonai saw that Yahuwah was with him, and that Yahuwah had made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. And it came to pass that from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that Yahuwah had blessed the Mitzri's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of Yahuwah was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he had left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person, and well favored. And it came to pass after these things, that his Adonai's woman cast her eyes upon Joseph, and said, Lie with me. But he refused, and said unto the woman of his Adonai, Behold, my Adonai knows not what it is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has into my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his woman. And how can I do this great wickedness and sin against Elohim? And it came to pass, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and spoke unto them, saying, See, he has brought an Ivri unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled, and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until his Adonai came home. And she spoke unto him according to these words, saying, The Ivri servant which you have brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his Adonai heard the words of his woman, which she spoke to him, saying, After this manner did your servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's Adonai took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound. And he was there in the prison. But Yahweh was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because Yahweh was with him, and that which he did, Yahweh made it to prosper. So, okay, hold on. Okay, so we see in this chapter that Joseph, he goes to live in Potiphar's house. And one thing I really want to point out really quick is it ironic or no that the word Potiphar, which is the word for Pharaoh's chief officer, is similar to police officer? Potiphar and police officer. And it was exactly Potiphar's job. He was there to police the people and to keep them in line. Anyways, so Joseph prospers in Potiphar's house because Yahweh was with him and he made his works to prosper. Well, Potiphar sees this and he makes Joseph the overseer of his house. He is in charge of everything. And remember, we have read in previous scriptures that Joseph was a comely young man, meaning he was handsome. And shortly after he became head of Potiphar's house, his wife started to lust after Joseph, and she wanted him to lie with her. And he profusely declined, and he tells her, Your husband has set me over all of his house. There is no servant in this house that is greater than I. My Adonai has withheld nothing from me, and you are his wife. How could you commit or even think to commit such abominations against your husband and against Yahweh? Well, she didn't like that answer, so she quite literally threw herself on Joseph. Well, Joseph knew what would happen if they were caught, so he is like trying to shove her off of him, and in the process, she grabs Joseph's shirt and she rips a piece off of it. And then she runs and she tells her husband's guardsman that Joseph was trying to force himself on her, saying, This Hebrew man mocks us. And she said that he forced himself on me, and when I screamed, he fled, and I tore a piece of his garment. And when her husband heard of this, he was very angry with Joseph, and he imprisoned him for it. But Yahweh showed Joseph mercy while he was in prison. The keeper of the prison made Joseph his right hand, and anything that was to be done in the prison was done by Joseph. Everything that Joseph did, Yah made it to prosper. And before moving forward, I want to read also from Jasher. We're going to read Jasher chapter 44, and we are going to get the account of this story from the book of Jasher as well, which goes into greater detail than Genesis does. So, let's see. So, and the book of Jasher was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we can see it be alluded to in several different books in the Old Testament as well. Okay, where are we at? 44, I think I said. Yep, all right, Jasher chapter 44. Let's read it. It's kind of a long chapter, so it's a very long chapter. Is that what I said? I said chapter 44, right? Hold on. Let me just make sure. Okay, yes, chapter 44. Okay. All right. And the sons of Yishmael, who had brought Joseph from the Midianim, who had brought him from his brethren, went to Mitzrayim with Joseph, and they came to the borders of Mitzrayim. And when they came near unto Mitzrayim, they met 4 men of the sons of Medan, the son of Abraham, who had gone forth from the land of Mitzrayim on their journey. And the Yishmaelim said unto them, Do you desire to purchase this slave from us? And they said, Deliver him over to us. And they delivered Joseph over to them, and they beheld him, and that he was very comely, and they purchased him for 20 shekels. And the Yishmaelim continued their journey to Mitzrayim, And the Midianim also returned that day to Mitzrayim. And the Midianim said to each other, Behold, we have heard that Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, seeks a good servant who shall stand before him to attend him, and to make him overseer over his house, and all belonging to him. Now therefore, come, let us sell to him for what we may desire, if he be able to give unto us that which we shall require for him. And these Midianim went and came to the house of Potiphar, and said unto him, We have heard that you seek a good servant to attend you. Behold, we have a servant that will please you. If you can give unto us that which you may desire, and we will sell him unto you. And Potiphar said, Bring him before me, and I will see him. And if he please me, I will give unto you that which you may require for him. And the Midianim went and brought Joseph, and placed him before Potiphar. And he saw him, and it pleased him exceedingly. And Potiphar said unto them, Tell me what you require for this youth. And they said, 400 pieces of silver we desire for him. And Potiphar said, I will give it to you if you bring me the record of his sale to you, and will tell me his history, for perhaps he may be stolen. For this youth is neither a slave nor the son of a slave, but I observe him in the appearance of a goodly and handsome person. And the Midianim went and brought unto him the Yishmaelim who had sold him to them. And they told him, saying, He is a slave, and we resold him to them. And Potiphar heard the words of the Yishmaelim, and in his giving the silver unto the Midianim. And the Midianim took the silver and went on their journey, and the Yishmaelim also returned home. And Potiphar took Joseph and brought him to his house that he might serve him. And Joseph found favor in the sight of Potiphar, and placed confidence in him, and made him overseer over his house, and all that belonged to him he delivered over to his hand. And Yahweh was with Joseph, and he became a prosperous man. And Yahweh blessed the house of Potiphar for the sake of Joseph. And Potiphar left all that he had in the hand of Joseph. And Joseph was one that caused things to come in and go out, and everything was regulated by his wish in the house of Potiphar. And Joseph was 18 years old, a youth with beautiful eyes and of comely appearance, and like unto him was not in the whole land of Mizraim. And at the time, while he was in his Adonai's house, going in and out of the house, and attending his Adonai, Zelika, his Adonai's woman, lifted her eyes up towards Joseph, and looked at him, and behold, he was a youth, comely and well-favored, and she lusted after his beauty in her heart, and her soul was fixed upon Joseph, and she enticed him day after day. And Zelika persuaded Joseph daily, but Joseph did not lift up his eyes to behold his Adonai's woman. And Zelika said unto him, How goodly are your appearance and form! Truly I have looked at all the slaves, and have not seen so beautiful a slave as you are. And Joseph said unto her, Surely he who created me in my mother's womb created all mankind. And she said unto him, How beautiful are your eyes, with which you have dazzled all the inhabitants of Mizraim, men and women. And he said unto her, How beautiful they are while we are alive! But should you behold them in Sheol, surely you would move away from them. And she said unto him, How beautiful and pleasing are all your words! Take now, I pray you, the harp which is in the house, and play with your hands, and let us hear your words. And he said unto her, How beautiful and pleasing are my words, when I speak the praise of my Elohim and his glory. And she said unto him, How very beautiful is the hair of your head! Behold, the golden comb which is in the house, take it, I pray you, and curl the hair of your head. And he said unto her, How long will you speak these words? Cease to utter these words to me, and rise and attend your domestic affairs. And she said unto him, There is no one in my house, and there is nothing to attend to but your words and to your wish. Yet notwithstanding all of this, she could not bring Joseph unto her, neither did he place his eye upon her, but directed his eyes below to the ground. And Zelika desired Joseph in her heart, that he should lie with her. And at that time that Joseph was sitting in the house doing his work, Zelika came and sat before him, and she enticed him daily with her discourse to lie with her, or even to look at her. But Joseph would not hearken to her. And she said unto him, If you will not do according to my words, I will chastise you with the punishment of death, and put an iron yoke upon you. And Joseph said unto her, Surely Elohim, who created man, loosens the fetters of prisoners, and it is he who will deliver me from your prison and from your judgment. And when she could not prevail over him to persuade him, her soul being still fixed upon him, her desire threw her into a grievous sickness. And all the women of Mizraim came to visit her, and they said unto her, Why are you in this declining state? You that lack nothing, surely your man is great and esteemed prince in the sight of the king. Should you lack anything of what your heart desires? And Zelika answered them, saying, This day it shall be made known to you, whence this disorder springs, in which you see me. And she commanded her maidservants to prepare food for all the women, and she made a banquet for them. And all the women ate in the house of Zelika. And she gave them knives to peel the citrons to eat them. And she commanded that they should dress Joseph in costly garments, and that he should appear before them. And Joseph came before their eyes, and all the women looked on Joseph, and could not take their eyes off from him. And they all cut their hands with the knives that they had in their hands. And all the citrons that were in their hands were filled with blood. And they knew not what they had done, but they continued to look at the beauty of Joseph, and did not turn their eyelids from him. And Zelika saw what they had done, and she said unto them, What is this work that you have done? Behold, I give you citrons to eat, and you have all cut your hands. And all the women saw their hands, and behold, they were full of blood, and their blood flowed down upon their garments. And they said unto her, This slave in your house has overcome us, and we could not turn our eyelids from him on account of his beauty. And she said unto them, Surely this happened to you in the moment that you looked at him, and you could not contain yourselves from him. How then can I refrain when he is constantly in my house, and I see him day after day going in and out of my house? How then can I keep from declining, or even perishing on account of this? And they said unto her, The words are true. For who can see this beautiful form in the house and refrain from him? And is he not your slave and attendant in your house? Oh, excuse me, guys. And why do you not tell him that which is in your heart, and suffer your soul to perish through this matter? And she said unto them, I am daily endeavoring to persuade him, and he will not consent to my wishes. And I promised him everything that is good, and yet I could not meet with no return from him. And I am therefore in a declining state, as you see. And Zelika became very ill on account of her desire towards Joseph. And she was desperately lovesick on account of him. And all the people of the house of Zelika and her man knew nothing of this matter, that Zelika was ill on account of her love to Joseph. And all the people of the house asked her, saying, Why are you ill and declining, and lack nothing? And she said unto them, I know not this thing which is daily increasing upon me. And all the women and her friends came daily to see her, and they spoke with her. And she said unto them, This can only be through the love of Joseph. And they said unto her, Entice him, and seize him secretly, and perhaps he may hearken to you, and put off this death from you. And Zelika became worse from her love to Joseph, as she continued to decline, till she had scarce strength to stand. And on a certain day Joseph was doing his Adonai's work in the house, and Zelika came secretly, and fell suddenly upon him. And Joseph rose up against her, and he was more powerful than she, and he brought her down to the ground. And Zelika wept on account of the desire of her heart towards him, and she supplicated him with weeping, and tears flowed down her cheeks. And she spoke unto him in a voice of supplication, and in bitterness of soul, saying, Have you ever heard, seen, or known of so beautiful a woman as I am, or better than myself, who speak daily unto you, fall into a decline through love for you, confer all this honor upon you, and still you will not hearken to my voice? And if it be through fear of your Adonai, lest he punish you, as the king lives, no harm shall come to you from your Adonai through this thing. Now therefore pray, listen to me, and consent for the sake of honor which I have conferred upon you, and put off this death from me. And why should I die for your sake? And she ceased to speak. And Joseph answered her, saying, Refrain from me, and leave this matter to my Adonai. Behold, my Adonai knows not what there is with me in the house. For all that belongs to him he has delivered into my hand. And how shall I do these things in my Adonai's house? For he has also greatly honored me in his house, and he has also made me overseer over his house, and he has exalted me. And there is no one greater in this house than I am, and my Adonai has refrained nothing from me, except you who are his woman. How then can you speak these words unto me? And how can I do this great evil and sin to Elohim and to your man? Now therefore refrain from me, and speak no more such words as these, for I will not hearken to your words. But Zelika would not hearken to Joseph when he spoke these words unto her, but she daily enticed him to listen to her. And it was after this that the brook of Mitzrayim was filled above all its sides, and all the inhabitants of Mitzrayim went forth, and also the kings and princes went forth with the timbrels and dances. For it was great rejoicing in Mitzrayim, and a holiday at the time, and the foundation of the sea of Shikor. And they went there to rejoice all day. And when the Mitzrayim went out to the river to rejoice, as was their custom, all the people of the house of Potiphar went with them. But Zelika would not go with them. For she said, I am indisposed. And she remained alone in the house, and no other person was with her in the house. And she rose up and ascended to her temple in the house, and she dressed herself in princely garments, and she placed upon her head precious stones of onyx. inlaid with silver and gold. And she beautified her face and skin with all sorts of women's purifying liquids, and she perfumed the temple and the house with cassia and frankincense, and she spread myrrh and aloes, and afterward she sat in the entrance of the temple, and in the passage of the house, through which Joseph passed through to do his work, and behold, Joseph came from the field, and entered to the house to do his Adonai's work. And he came to the place through which he had to pass, and he saw all the work of Zalika, and he turned back. And Zalika saw Joseph turning back from her, and she called out to him, saying, What ails you, Joseph? Come to your work, and behold, I will make room for you until you shall have passed to your seat. And Joseph returned and came to the house, and passed from thence to the place of his seat. And he sat down to do his Adonai's work as usual, and behold, Zalika came to him, and stood before him in her princely garments. And the scent from her clothes was spread to a distance. And she hastened, and caught a hold of Joseph and his garments, and she said unto him, As the king lives, if you will not perform my request, you shall die this day. And she hastened and stretched forth her other hand, and drew a sword from beneath her garments. And she placed it upon Joseph's neck, and said, Rise and perform my request, and if not, you die this day. And Joseph was afraid of her and her doing this thing, and he rose up to flee from her. And she seized the front of his garments, and in the terror of his flight, the garment which Zalika seized was torn. And Joseph left the garment in the hand of Zalika, and he fled and got out, for he was in fear. And when Zalika saw that Joseph's garment was torn, and that he had left it in her hand, and he had fled, she was afraid for her life, lest the report should spread concerning her. And she rose up and acted with cunning, and put off the garments in which she was dressed, and she put on her other garments. And she took Joseph's garment, and she laid it beside her, and she went and seated herself in the place where she had sat in her illness, before the people of her house had gone out to the river. And she called a young lad who was then in the house, and she ordered him to call the people of the house to her. And when she saw them, she said unto them with a loud voice and lamentation, See what an Ivri your Adonai has brought to me in the house, for he came this day to lie with me. For when you had gone out, he came to the house, and seeing that there was no person in the house, he came unto me, and he caught hold of me, with intent to lie with me. And I seized his garments, and tore them, and called out against him with a loud voice. And when I had lifted up my voice, he was afraid of his life, and he left his garment before me, and fled. And the people of her house spoke nothing, but their wrath was very much kindled against Joseph. And they went to his Adonai, and told him the words of his woman. And Potiphar came home enraged, and his woman cried out to him, saying, What is this thing that you have done unto me, in bringing an Ivri servant into my house? For he came unto me this day to sport with me. Thus did he do unto me this day. And Potiphar heard the words of his woman, and he ordered Joseph to be punished with severe stripes. And they did so to him. And while they were smiting him, Joseph called out with a loud voice, and he lifted up his eyes to heaven, and he said, O Yahweh Elohim, you know that I am innocent of these things, and why shall I die this day? Through falsehood, and by the hand of the uncircumcised wicked men whom you know. And while Potiphar's men were beating Joseph, he continued to cry out and weep. And there was a child there, 11 months old. And Yahweh opened the mouth of the child, and spoke these words before Potiphar's men who were smiting Joseph, saying, What do you want of this man, and why do you do this evil unto him? My mother speaks falsely, and utters lies. Thus was the transaction. And the child told them accurately all that happened, and all the words of Zalika to Joseph that day after day he declared unto them. And all the men heard the words of the child, and they wondered greatly at the child's words. And the child ceased to speak and became still. And Potiphar was very much ashamed at the words of his son, and he commanded his men to not beat Joseph any more. And the men ceased beating Joseph. And Potiphar took Joseph and ordered him to be brought to justice before the priests, who were judges belonging to the king, in order to judge him concerning this affair. And Potiphar and Joseph came before the priests, who were the king's judges, and he said unto them, Decide, I pray you, what judgment is due to a servant, for thus he has done. And the priest said unto Joseph, Why did you do this thing to your Adonai? And Joseph answered them, saying, Not so, my Adonim. Thus was the matter. And Potiphar said unto Joseph, Surely I entrusted in your hands all that belonged to me, and I withheld nothing from you but my woman. And how could you do this evil? And Joseph answered him, saying, Not so, my Adonai. As Yahweh lives, and as your soul lives, my Adonai, the word which you did hear from your woman is untrue, for thus was the affair this day. A year has elapsed to me since I have been in your house. Have you seen any iniquity in me, or anything which might cause you to demand my life? And the priest said unto Potiphar, Send, we pray you, and let them bring before us Joseph's torn garment, and let us see the tear in it. And if it shall be the tear that is in the front of the garment, then his face must have been opposite to her, and she must have caught hold of him to come to her. And with deceit did your woman do all that she has spoken. And they brought Joseph's garment before the priests who were judges. And they saw, and behold, the tear was in front of Joseph. And all the judges and priests knew that she had pressed him. And they said, the judgment of death is not due to this slave, for he has done nothing. But his judgment is that he be placed in prison, in the prison house, on account of the report, which through him has gone forth against your woman. And Potiphar heard the words, and he placed him in the prison house, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And Joseph was in the house of confinement for 12 years. And notwithstanding this, his Adonai's woman did not turn from him, and she did not cease from speaking to him day after day to hearken to her. And at the end of 3 months, Zelika continued going to Joseph to the house of confinement day by day, and she enticed him to hearken to her. And Zelika said unto Joseph, how long will you remain in this house? But hearken now to my voice, and I will bring you out of this house. And Joseph answered her, saying, it is better for me to remain in this house than to hearken to your words, and to sin against Elohim. And she said unto him, if you will not perform my wish, I will pluck out your eyes, and add fetters to your feet, and will deliver you into the hands of them whom you did not know before. And Joseph answered her and said, behold, the Elohim of the whole earth is able to deliver me from all that you can do unto me. For he opens the eyes of the blind, and loosens those that are bound, and preserves all strangers who are unacquainted with the land. And when Zelika was unable to persuade Joseph to hearken to her, she left off going to entice him. And Joseph was still confined in the house of confinement. And Yaakov, the father of Joseph, and all his brethren who were in the land of Canaan, still mourned and wept in those days on account of Joseph. For Yaakov refused to be comforted for his son Joseph, and Yaakov cried aloud and wept and mourned all those days. Okay, look at that was long. I told you guys that was long. Okay, so now we are on to Genesis chapter 41. Give me just a moment. Okay, Genesis chapter 41. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Mizraim and his baker had offended the Adonai of the king of Mizraim. And Pharaoh was wroth against 2 of his officers, and against the chief of butlers, and against the chief of bakers. And he put them in a ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a season in the ward. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. But the butler and the baker of the king of Mizraim, which were bound in the prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning, and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that they were with him in the ward of his Adonai's house, saying, wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, we have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, do not interpretations belong to Elohim? Tell me them, I pray you. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said to him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it had budded, and her blossom shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up your head, and restore you unto your place. And you shall deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner when you were his butler. But think on me when it shall be well with you, and show kindness, I pray you, unto me, and make mention of me to Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Ephraim, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. And when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there was all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days Pharaoh shall lift up your head from off of you, and shall hang you on a tree, and the birds shall eat your flesh from off of you. And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he had made a feast unto all his servants. And he lifted up the head of his chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again. And he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, and Joseph, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. All right, give me just a moment. Okay, so in this chapter, we see that the chief butler of Pharaoh and his chief baker had offended him, so then he had them imprisoned with Joseph. And the captain of the guard, who is in charge of the prison, he charged Joseph with serving these two men while they were in prison. And they both have dreams that are pretty similar to each other, but they didn't understand what their dreams meant. And Joseph hears them talking about this, and Joseph says, "Tell me your dreams, and I will tell you the interpretation thereof." And Joseph tells them, "Do not interpretations of dreams belong to Elohim?" So they tell Joseph, and the butler goes first, and he says, "I saw a vine. And in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though that they had budded, and her blossom shot forth, and there were clusters of ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the cup, and I pressed grapes into Pharaoh's cup, and then I gave it to him." And Joseph tells him, "This is the interpretation of your dream. 3 branches mean 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head, and he will restore you to your place, and you shall deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, as the former manner, when you were his butler." And Joseph says, "Think on me with kindness, I pray you. When you see Pharaoh, make a mention of me and get me out of here." And he says, "I was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and I have done nothing here. They have imprisoned me." And when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he told Joseph his dream as well. And he says that in his dream he had 3 white baskets on his head, and in the uppermost basket there was all manners of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds ate the meat out of the basket that was on his head. And Joseph said, "This is the interpretation of your dream. The baskets also mean 3 days, and in 3 days the Pharaoh will lift your head up from off of you, and he will hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from you." And it came to pass that on the 3rd day, Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast, and he restored his chief butler to his position. And he again put Pharaoh's cup into his hand, but he hung the baker, I'm sorry. And as Joseph had interpreted their dreams to them. But the chief butler did not remember Joseph. He forgot to mention him. So really quick, let's go to Jasher again. We're going to read Jasher 45. I don't think this is as long as 40. Yeah, this is not nearly as long as 44. So, it says, "And it was that time in the year, which was the year of Joseph's going down to Mizraim, after his brothers had sold him, that Reuben, the son of Yaakov, went to Timnah, and took unto him for a woman, Eliarim, the daughter of Avi the Canaanite. And he came to her, and Eliarim, I'm not sure how to say her name, the woman of Reuben, conceived and bore him Canok, Palu, Shestron, and Carami, 4 sons. And Shimon, his brother, took his sister Dinah for a woman, and she bore unto him Yemuel, Yamin, Ohad, Yakin, and Sochar, 5 sons. And afterward he came to Bunah the Canaanite woman, the same is Bunah, who Shimon took captive from the city of Shechem. And Bunah was before Dinah, and attended upon her. And Shimon came to her, and she bore unto him Shaul. And Yehudah went at that time to Adullam, and he came to a man of Adullam, and his name was Shirah. And Yehudah saw the daughter of a man from Canaan, and her name was Eliath, the daughter of Shua. And he took her, and he came to her. And Eliath bore unto Yehudah Onan, and Shiloh, 3 sons. And Levi and Yishakar went themselves to the land of the east, and they took unto themselves for women the daughters of Yovav, the son of Yoktan, the son of Eber. And Yovav, the son of Yoktan, had 2 daughters. The name of the elder daughter was Adinah, and the name of the younger daughter was Aridah. And Levi took Adinah, and Yishkar took Aridah, and they came to the land of Canaan, to their father's house. And Adinah bore unto Levi Gershon, Kohath, and Mary, 3 sons. And Aridah bore unto Yishkar Tola, Pua, Yav, and Shimron, 4 sons. And Dan went to the land of Moab, and took for a woman Aphaleth, the daughter of Jemudan, the Moavi. And he brought her into the land of Canaan. And Aphaletheth was barren, and she had no offspring. And Elohim afterward remembered Aphaletheth, the woman of Dan, and she conceived and bore a son, and called his name Shushim. And Naphtali went to Haran, and took from thence the daughters of Amiran, the son of Uz, and the son of Nahor, for women. And these are the names of the daughters of Amiran. The name of the elder was Merima, and the name of the younger Uzith. And Naphtali took Merima, and Gad took Uzith, and brought them to the land of Canaan, to their father's house. And Merima bore unto Naphtali Yaxio, Guni, Yester, and Shilem, 4 sons. And Uzith bore unto Gad Sivon, Shagi, Shuni, Espon, Eri, Aravdi, and Arieli, 7 sons. And Asher went forth, and he took Adan, the daughter of Aphal, the son of Hadad, the son of Yishmael, for a woman, and he brought her into the land of Canaan. And Adan, the woman of Asher, died in those days, and she had no offspring. And it was after the death of Adan that Asher went to the other side of the river, and took for a woman Hadurah, the daughter of Avimael, the son of Eber, the son of Shem. And we all know that Shem, he was one of Noah's sons. And the young woman was of a comely appearance, and a woman of sense, and she had been the woman of Malchiel, the son of Elam, the son of Shem. And Hadurah bore a daughter unto Malchiel, and he called her name Sirach. And Malchiel died after this, and Hadurah went and remained in her father's house. And after the death of the woman of Asher, he went and took Hadurah for a woman, and brought her to the land of Canaan. And Sirach, her daughter, he also brought with them, and she was 3 years old. And the damsel was brought up in Yaakov's house. And the damsel was of a comely appearance, and she went in and sanctified the ways of the children of Yaakov. She lacked nothing, and Yahweh gave her wisdom and understanding. And Hadurah, the woman of Asher, conceived, and bore unto him Yimna, Yishva, Yishvi, and Bere'shiyth, 4 sons. And Zuvulun went to Midian, and took for a woman Bere'shiyth, the daughter of Molad, the son of Avida, the son of Midian, and brought her to the land of Canaan. And Bere'shiyth bore to Zuvulun Sarad, Elon, and Yakilel, 3 sons. And Yaakov sent to Aram, the son of Sova, and the son of Tarak. And he took for his son Benjamin Machaliah, I'm not sure how to say that one, the daughter of Aram, and she came to the land of Canaan, to the house of Yaakov. And Benjamin was 10 years old when he took Machaliah, the daughter of Aram, for a woman. And Machaliah conceived, and bore unto Benjamin Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, and Naaman, 5 sons. And Benjamin went afterwards and took a woman, Aribath, the daughter of Shimron, the son of Avraham, in addition to his first woman, and he was 18 years old. And Aribath bore unto Benjamin Ishi, Rosh, Mapim, Chapim, and Ard, 5 sons. And in those days Yehudah went to the house of Shem, and took Tamar, the daughter of Elam, the son of Shem, for a woman for his firstborn Er. And Er came to his woman Tamar, and she became his woman. And when he came to her, he outwardly destroyed his seed and his work, and was evil in the sight of Yahweh, and Yahweh slew him. And it was after the death of Er, Yehudah's firstborn, that Yehudah said unto Onan, Go unto your brother's woman, and marry her as the next of kin, and rise up seed to your brother. And Onan took Tamar for woman, and he came to her. And Onan did like unto the work of his brother, and his work was evil in the sight of Yahweh, and he slew him also. And when Onan died, Yehudah said to Tamar, Remain in your father's house until my son Shiloh shall have grown up. And Yehudah did no more delight in Tamar, to give her unto Shiloh, for he said, Perchance he will also die like his brothers. And Tamar rose up and went and remained in her father's house. And Tamar was in her father's house for some time. And at the revolution of the year, Aliath, the woman of Yehudah, died, and Yehudah was comforted for his woman. And after the death of Aliath, Yehudah went up with his friend Shira to Timnah to shear the sheep. And Tamar had heard that Yehudah had gone up to Timnah to shear the sheep, and that Shiloh was grown up, and Yehudah did not delight in her. And Tamar rose up and put off her garments of her widowhood, and she put a veil upon her, and she entirely covered herself, and she went and sat in the public thoroughfare, which is upon the road to Timnah. And Yehudah passed and saw her, and he came to her, and she conceived by him. And at the time of being delivered, behold, there were twins in her womb. And he called the name of the first Perez, and the name of the second Zerach. So, okay. So, all right, now we are on to chapter 41 of Genesis, our final chapter. So, let's go ahead and read that really fast. So, all right, Genesis 41. So, and it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat flesh, and they fled in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke, and he slept and dreamed the second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain came upon one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his ruach, his spirit, was troubled. And he sent and he called for all the magicians of Mitzrayim and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Then spoke the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was wroth with his servant, and he put me inward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, I and he. We dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, an Ivri, a servant to the captain of the guard. And we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto my office, and him he hanged. And then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him out hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself, and he changed his raiment, and he came in unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of you, that you can understand a dream and interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. Elohim shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 kine, fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored and lean-fleshed, such as I have never saw in all the land of Mitzrayim for badness. And then the lean and ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored as at the beginning. So I awoke, and I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up on one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears withered, thin, and blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. And I told this unto the magicians, but there was none that could declare it to me. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. Elohim has showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. And the dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What Elohim is about to do he shows unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great and plenty throughout all the land of Mitzrayim, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in all the land of Mitzrayim, and the famine shall consume the land, and the plenty shall not be known in the land by any reason of the famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for the dream that was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, it is because the thing is established by Elohim, and Elohim will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Mitzrayim. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Mitzrayim in the 7 plenteous years, and let them gather all the food in those good years that come, and lay up the grain under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them guard food in the cities, and food that shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Mitzrayim, that the land perishes not through the famine. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this? A man whom a man whom the Ruach Elohim is? And Pharaoh said unto Elioseph, Forasmuch Elohim has showed you all of this, there is none so discreet and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and according to your word shall all my people be ruled. Not only in throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said unto Elioseph, See, I have set you over all the land of Mizraim. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and he put it upon Joseph's hand, and he arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, Bow the knee, and he made him ruler over all the land of Mizraim. And Pharaoh said unto Elioseph, I am Pharaoh, and without you shall no man lift up his hand or his foot in all the land of Mizraim. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Sophanath Paneach. I'm not sure what that means either, but he did not call him Joseph or Joseph. And he gave him to be his woman, Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Mizraim. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Mizraim. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and went through all the land of Mizraim. And in the 7 plenteous years the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Mizraim, and laid up the food in the cities, and the food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered the grain as the sand of the sea, very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, bore unto him. And Joseph called the name of his firstborn son Menashe, for Elohim said, He has made me forget all my toil in all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for Elohim has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Mizraim were ended, and the 7 years of famine began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the famine was in all the lands, but in the land of Mizraim there was bread. And when all the land of Mizraim was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Mizraim, Go unto Elioseph, and do what he says to do. And the famine was over all the face of the earth. And Joseph opened up all the storehouses, and he sold unto the Mizraim. And the famine waxed sore in the land of Mizraim. And all countries came into Mizraim to Elioseph for to buy grain, because the famine was so sore in all the lands. All right, and lastly, we are going to read Jasher chapter 46. So I was actually a couple chapters behind here. Okay, so actually, I should have read okay, now I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to read chapter 48, and then we're going to call it quits. Chapter 48 is a little long, though. So, all right, chapter 46. In those days, Joseph was still confined in the prison house in the land of Mizraim. And at the time, the attendants of Pharaoh were standing before him, the chief of butlers and the chief of bakers. This is what I should have read previously, which belonged to the king of Mizraim. And the butler took wine and placed it before the king to drink. And the baker placed bread before the king to eat. And the king drank of the wine and ate of the bread, and his servants and ministers that ate at the king's table. And while they were eating and drinking, the butler and the baker remained there. And Pharaoh's ministers found many flies in the wine, which the butler had brought, and the stones of nitre were found in the baker's bread. And the captain of the guard placed Joseph as the attendant on Pharaoh's officers. And Pharaoh's officers were in confinement 1 year. And at the end of 1 year, they both dreamed dreams in one night, in the place of confinement where they were, and in the morning Joseph came came to them to attend upon them as usual. And he saw them, and behold, their countenances were dejected and sad. And Joseph asked them, Why are your countenances so sad and dejected this day? And they said unto him, We dreamed a dream, and there was no one to interpret it. And Joseph said unto them, Relate, I pray you, your dream unto me, and Elohim shall give you an answer of peace as you desire. And the butler related his dream unto Joseph, and he said, I saw in my dream, and behold, a large vine was before me, and upon that vine I saw 3 branches. And the vine speedily blossomed and reached a great height, and its clusters were ripened and became grapes. And I took the grapes and pressed them in a cup and placed it in Pharaoh's hand, and he drank. And Joseph said unto him, The 3 branches that were upon the vine are 3 days. Yet within 3 days the king will order you to be brought out, and he will restore you to your office. And you shall give the king his wine to drink, as at first when you were his butler. But let me find favor in your sight, that you shall remember me to Pharaoh when it will be well with you, and do kindness unto me, and get me brought forth from this prison, for I was stolen away from the land of Canaan, and was sold for a slave into this place. And also that which was told to you concerning my Adonai's woman is false, for they placed me in this dungeon for naught. And the butler answered Joseph, saying, If the king deals well with me at first, as you last interpreted to me, I will do that you desire, and get you brought out of this dungeon. And the baker, seeing that Joseph had accurately interpreted the butler's dream, also approached and related the whole of his dream unto Joseph. And he said unto him, In my dream I saw, and behold, 3 white baskets upon my head. And I looked, and behold, there were in the uppermost basket all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and behold, the birds were eating them from off my head. And Joseph said unto him, 3 baskets which you did see are 3 days. Yet with 3 days Pharaoh will take off your head and hang you upon the tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from off of you, as you saw in your dream. And in those days the queen was about to be delivered, and upon that day she bore a son unto the king of Mitzrayim. And they proclaimed that the king had gotten his firstborn son, and all the people of Mitzrayim together with the officers and servants of Pharaoh rejoiced greatly. And upon the 3rd day of his birth Pharaoh made a feast for his officers and servants, for the hosts of the land of Soar, and of the land of Mitzrayim. And all the people of Mitzrayim and the servants of Pharaoh came to eat and drink with the king at the feast of his son, and rejoiced the king's rejoicing. And all the officers of the king and his servants were rejoicing at that time for 8 days at the feast. And they made merry with all sorts of musical instruments and timbrels and dances in the king's house for 8 days. And the butler to whom Joseph had interpreted his dream forgot Joseph, and he did not mention him to the king as he had promised, for this thing was from Yahweh in order to punish Joseph, because he had trusted in a man. And Joseph remained after this in the prison house 2 years, until he had completed 12 years. So, all right. Lastly, I'm going to read Jasher chapter 48 to you. It's a little long, but let's go ahead and get through it. Okay. In those days, after the death of Yitzhak, Yahweh commanded and caused a famine upon the whole earth. At that time, Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim, was sitting upon his throne in the land of Mitzrayim, and he lay in his bed and dreamed dreams. And Pharaoh saw in his dream that he was standing by the side of the river of Mitzrayim. And while he was standing, he saw, and behold, 7 fat flesh and well-favored kine came up out of the river, and 7 other kine, lean flesh and ill-favored, came up after them. And the 7 ill-favored ones swallowed up the well-favored ones, and still their appearance was ill as at first. And he awoke, and he slept again, and he dreamed a second time. And he saw, and behold, 7 ears of grain came up in one stalk, rank and good, and 7 thin ears blasted with the east wind, and sprang up after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the full ones. And Pharaoh awoke out of this dream, and in the morning the king remembered his dreams, and his ruach, his spirit, was sadly troubled on account of his dreams. And the king hastened and sent and called for all the magicians of Mitzrayim and the wise men, and they came and stood before Pharaoh. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed dreams, and there is none to interpret them to me. And they said unto the king, Relate your dreams to your servants, and let us hear them. And the king related his dreams to them, and they all answered and said with one voice to the king, May the king live forever, and this is the interpretation of your dreams. The 7 good kine, which you did see, denote 7 daughters that would be born unto you in the latter days. And the 7 kine which you saw come up after them and swallowed them up are for a sign that the daughters who will be born unto you will all die in the lifetime of the king. And that which you did see is in the second dream of the 7 full good ears of grain coming up in one stalk, This is their interpretation, that you will build unto yourself in the latter days 7 cities throughout the land of Mitzrayim, and in that which you saw of the 7 blasted ears of grain springing up after them and swallowing them up, while you did behold them with your eyes, is for a sign that the cities which you will build will all be destroyed in the latter days in the lifetime of the king. And when they spoke these words, the king did not incline his ear to their words, neither did he fix his heart upon them, for the king knew in his wisdom that they did not give a proper interpretation of the dreams. And when they had finished speaking before the king answered them, saying, What is this thing that you have spoken unto me? Surely you have uttered falsehood and spoken lies. Therefore now give the proper interpretation of my dreams, that you may not die. And the king commanded after this, and he sent and called again for other wise men, and they came and stood before the king. And the king related his dreams to them, and they all answered him according to the first interpretation. And the king's anger was kindled, and he was very wroth. And the king said unto them, Surely you speak lies and utter falsehood in what you have said. And the king commanded that a proclamation should be issued throughout the land of Mitzrayim, saying, It is resolved by the king and his great men, that any wise man who knows and understands the interpretation of dreams, and will not come this day before the king, he shall die. And the man that will declare unto the king the proper interpretation of his dreams, there shall be given unto him all that he will require from the king. And all the wise men in the land of Mizraim came before the king together with all the magicians and sorcerers that were in Mizraim, and in Goshen, and in Ramesses, and in Taphani, and in Soar, and in all the places on the borders of Mizraim, and they all stood before the king. All the nobles and the princes and attendants belonging to the king came together from all the cities of Mizraim, and they all sat before the king, and the king related his dreams before the wise men and the princes, and all that sat before the king were astonished at the vision. And all the wise men who were before the king were greatly divided in their interpretation of his dreams. Some of them interpreted them to the king, saying, The 7 good kine are 7 kings, who from the king's issue will be raised over Mizraim, and the 7 bad kine are 7 princes, who will stand up against them in the latter days and destroy them. And the 7 ears of grain are 7 princes belonging to Mizraim, who will fall in the hands of 7 less powerful princes of their enemies in the wars of our Adonai the king. And some of them interpreted to the king in this manner, saying, The 7 good kine are the strong cities of Mizraim, and the 7 bad kine are the 7 nations of the land of Canaan, who will come against the 7 cities of Mizraim in the latter days and destroy them. And that which you saw in the second dream of the 7 good and bad ears of grain is a sign that the government of Mizraim will again return to your seed as at first. And in his reign, the people of the cities of Mizraim will turn against the 7 cities of Canaan, who are stronger than they, and will destroy them. And the government of Mizraim will return to your seed. And some of them said unto the king, This is the interpretation of your dreams. The 7 good kine are 7 queens, whom you will take for your women in the latter days. And the 7 bad kine denote those women will all die in the lifetime of the king. And the 7 good and bad ears of grain, which you did see in the second dream, are 14 children, and it will be in the latter days that they will stand up and fight amongst themselves, and 7 of them will smite the 7 that are more powerful. And some of them said these words unto the king, saying, The 7 good kine denote that 7 children will be born to you, and they will slay 7 of your children's children in the latter days. And the 7 good ears of grain, which you did see in the second dream, are those princes against whom the 7 other less powerful princes will fight and destroy them in the latter days, and will avenge your children's cause, and the government will again return to your seed. And the king heard all the words of the wise men of Mitzrayim, and their interpretations of his dreams, and none of them pleased the king. And the king knew in his wisdom that they did not altogether speak correctly in all these words, for this was from Yahweh to frustrate the words of the wise men of Mitzrayim, in order that Yosef might go forth from the house of confinement, and in order that he should become great in Mitzrayim. And the king saw that none amongst the wise men and magicians of Mitzrayim spoke correctly to him. And the king's wrath was kindled, and his anger burned within him. And the king commanded that all the wise men and magicians should go out from before him. And they all went out from before the king with shame and disgrace. And the king commanded that a proclamation be sent throughout Mitzrayim to slay all the magicians that were in Mitzrayim, and not one of them should be suffered to live. And the captains of the guards belonging to the king rose up, and each man drew his sword, and they began to smite the magicians of Mitzrayim and the wise men. After this, Merab, the chief butler of the king, came and bowed down before the king and sat before him. And the butler said unto the king, May the king live forever, and his government be exalted in the land. You were angry with your servant in those days. Now 2 years pass, and you did place me in the ward, and I was for some time in the ward, I and the chief of bakers. And there And there was with us an Ivri servant belonging to the captain of the guard. His name was Joseph, for his Adonai had been angry with him and placed him in the house of confinement, and he attended us there. And in some time when we were in the ward, we dreamed dreams in one night, I and the chief of bakers. We dreamed, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And we came in the morning, and we told them to that servant, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did correctly interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so was the event. There fell not to the ground any of his words. Now therefore, my Adonai and king, do not slay the people of Mitzrayim for naught. Behold, that slave is still confined in the house by the captain of the guard, his Adonai, in the house of confinement. If it pleases my king, let him send for him, that he may come before you, and he will make known to you the correct interpretation of the dream which you did dream. And the king heard the words of the chief butler, and the king ordered that the wise men of Mitzrayim should not be slain. And the king ordered his servants to bring Joseph before him. And the king said unto them, Go to him, and do not terrify him, lest he be confused, and will not know to speak correctly. And the servants of the king went to Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And the king's servants shaved him, and they changed his prison garment, and he came before the king. And the king was sitting upon his royal throne in a princely dress girt around with a golden ephod, and fine gold, which upon it was sparkled, and the carbuncle, and the ruby, and the emerald, together with all the precious stones that were upon the king's head, and dazzled the eye. And Joseph wondered greatly at the king. And the throne upon which he sat was covered with gold and silver, and with onyx stones, and it had 70 steps. And it was their custom throughout the land of Mitzrayim that every man who came to speak to the king, if he was a prince, or one that was estimable in the sight of the king, he ascended to the king's throne as far as the 31st step, and the king would descend to the 36th step and speak with him. If he was one of the common people, he ascended to the 3rd step, and the king would descend to the 4th step and speak to him. And their custom was moreover that any man who understood to speak in all 70 languages, he ascended to the steps and went up and spoke till he reached the king. And any man who could not complete the 70, he ascended as many steps as the languages which he knew how to speak in. And it was customary in those days in Mitzrayim that no one should reign over them, but who understood and spoke in the 70 languages. And this is where we learn the true definition of what speaking in tongues is. Speaking in tongues is not that weird crap that you have seen plastered all over the TV. Speaking in tongues is when you get the Ruach, the Holy Spirit, and you speak a language that you did not know before. You just have knowledge of this language that you have never spoken before, as we are going to see Yahweh do right here with Joseph, who only spoke Hebrew and Egyptian at the time. Okay. And when Joseph came before the king, he bowed down to the ground before the king, and he ascended to the 3rd step. And the king sat upon the 4th step and spoke with Joseph. And the king said unto Joseph, I dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter to interpret it properly. And I commanded this day that all the magicians of Mitzrayim and the wise men thereof should come before me. And I related my dreams to them, and no one has properly interpreted them to me. And after this, I this day heard concerning you that you are a wise man and can correctly interpret every dream that you hear. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, Let Pharaoh relate his dreams that he dreamed. Surely the interpretation belongs to Elohim. And Pharaoh related his dreams to Joseph, to the dream of the kine and the dream of the ears of grain. And the king left off speaking. And Joseph was then clothed with the Ruach Elohim before the king, and he knew all the things that would befall the king from that day forward, and he knew the proper interpretation of the king's dream, and he spoke before the king. And Joseph found favor in the sight of the king, and the king inclined his ears and his heart, and he heard all the words of Joseph. And Joseph said unto the king, Do not imagine that they are 2 dreams, for it is only one dream. For that which Elohim has chosen to do throughout the land, he has shown to the king in his dream. And this is the proper interpretation of your dream. The 7 good kine and ears of grain are 7 years, and the 7 bad kine and ears of grain are also 7 years. It is one dream. Behold, the 7 years that are coming will be a great plenty throughout the land. And after that, the 7 years of famine will follow them, a very grievous famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten from the land, and the famine will consume the inhabitants of the land. The king dreamed one dream, and the dream was therefore repeated unto Pharaoh, because the thing is established by Elohim, and Elohim will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore I give you counsel, and deliver your soul and the souls of the inhabitants of the land from the evil of the famine that you seek throughout your kingdom, for a man very discreet and wise, who knows all the affairs of government, and appoint him to superintend over the land of Mitzrayim. And let the man whom you place over Mitzrayim appoint officers under him, that they gather in all the food of the good years that are coming, and let them lay up grain and deposit it in your appointed stores, and let them keep that food for the 7 years of famine, that it may be found for you and your people and your whole land, and that you and your land be not cut off by the famine. Let all the inhabitants of the land also be ordered that they gather in, every man the produce of his field, of all sorts of food, during the 7 good years, and that they place it in their stores, that it may be found for them in the days of the famine, that they may live upon it. And this is the proper interpretation of your dream, and this is the counsel given to save your soul and the souls of all your subjects. And the king answered and said unto Joseph, Who says and who knows that your words are correct? And he said unto the king, This shall be a sign for you respecting all my words, that they are true, and that my advice is good for you. Behold, your woman sits this day upon the stool of delivery, and she will bear you a son, and you will rejoice with him. And when your child shall have gone forth from his mother's womb, your firstborn son that has been born these 2 years back shall die, and you will be comforted in the child that will be born unto you this day. And Joseph finished speaking these words to the king, and he bowed down to the king, and he went out. And when Joseph had gone out from the king's presence, those signs which Joseph had spoken unto the king came to pass on that day. And the queen bore a son on that day. And the king heard the good news about his son, and he rejoiced. And when the reporter had gone forth from the king's presence, the king's servants found the firstborn son of the king fallen dead upon the ground. And there was a great lamentation and noise in the king's house. And the king heard it, and said, What is this noise and lamentation that I have heard in the house? And they told the king that his firstborn son had died. And then the king knew that all Joseph's words that he had spoken were correct, and the king was consoled for his son by the child that was born to him on the days as Joseph had spoken. So, all right, guys. A little long Torah portion today, so thank you for bearing with me. So, all right, brothers and sisters, that wraps up today's Torah portion. Let's go ahead and close up with a prayer. Yahweh, thank you for allowing me to share your Torah and to break down your word and teach it correctly. And I pray you send your discernment upon my viewers. I pray that we are worthy to be redeemed by your Son, Yahushua HaMashiach. And I pray that we bring honor and glory to your name through him. Guide us, Abba, and instruct us in righteousness, and allow us to fulfill your Torah. We praise your name, Yahweh Sabaoth. In Yahushua's name we pray. Amen. All right, brothers and sisters, I will see you again next week. Enjoy the rest of your Shabbat, and shalom.